Hello gamers, welcome to the first part of Chapter 6 for
Not too
my
far.
Platinum journey through
With
Uncharted
you, I never
3.
know if that means a quarter mile or 20.
This feels like a little
That
bit of a
time you got us
throwback
lost in
to
Peru?
Uncharted 1
Oh,
and
you
Uncharted
really want to
2
bring up Peru?
in kind of
You are
the
not
sense that
so
we're
old
going
now.
to
I was
a jungly
15,
place.
Sully.
You
Should
see
have known
right
when I
there,
met you that I'd
we
be in
pick up our
prison within
first
a year.
treasure in this chapter.
You were headed that way all on your own.
Again, I forget what the
Besides,
number
I got
we're
you
on,
out,
but
didn't
I
I?
will make sure
Always get you
you
out.
guys aren't confused about that. This first part is pretty straightforward, but there are two treasures that you can get fairly close to
Just
each
like in
other.
Lawrence's notes. Gotta have more faith in me, Sully. Of course, I don't remember this ravine being on the map.
Instead of
Well,
going
just put that in.
to the right, you're going to make a left here
Come on, we'll find another way around.
and pick up this treasure right on this side. And then we're going to do a little bit of some, platforming, enjoy the scenery. One of the things that I think, and you start to see that in this chapter, but definitely something that they highlighted more in this game, is the water effects. I think the water, just the way it looks in this game, is phenomenal next to the sand.
Have you, Sully?
I think those are two things that are done really, really well. Again, it's just one of those things where when you remove it from the shadow of
this looks
Uncharted 2, I
sketchy.
think it really is a quality game that stands out on its own.
Look, Sully,
I
your
do a
first
little bit
car.
of exploring here. I don't know why. There's really no treasure here for you to find. I just, my curiosity got the better of me. And then because of my fear of randomly dying, or not knowing how far Nathan can fall, I just decided to make that drop
Knight who
there.
owned this castle, Lord Godfrey, returned from the Crusades in the 12th century. According to Lawrence, all that's left
I
of
think
the
also
original
part of the
castle
reason
is the
I've
square
appreciated
in the
this
gardens.
game a little
Godfrey
bit
brought any
more
secrets
is
back
that
from Arabia.
not only do they reference
where we're
things
gonna
like
find
Lawrence of Arabia, but it also feels a little bit more like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade in terms of, the feel of the Indiana Jones movies. And I think that is not only in how they talk about the Crusades, and maybe that's part of it, but also just Nathan and his relationship to Sully. While it's not the same as Indiana Jones and his relationship to his father, you kind of get a similar vibe out of it, which is, maybe it's a controversial opinion to say this, but The Last Crusade is definitely stands up as probably my favorite Indiana Jones movie. Part of it's because it's the first one that I saw. I actually saw them out of order, and I remember seeing The Last Crusade first, then Temple of Doom, and then Raiders of the Lost Ark. Real quick, just before I forget, we were supposed to go up there earlier, but if you go to the right and climb these bricks, you can actually get your third treasure of this level, and then go ahead and drop down.
Be right back. Crap. Oh, that hurts.
Hey, kid, up here. It's chain shut.
All right, back up. I'll shoot the lock off.
At some point, I think I'll do a playthrough of Uncharted 4 and my journey to getting the platinum in that. Even though I have several of the trophies there, I still want to kind of finish that game up. And I remember how great the game looked when we went to the Pirate City. I remember really just loving the look of it and kind of that broken down, apocalyptic look to everything. But I think this game does a great job of that too. And it really, maybe I'm just, I don't know how much of this is true, but some of the design of this level specifically, when you talk about the chateau, it feels like some of this helped inspire the look of The Last of Us. When you talk about kind of the old ruins of civilization or of society, you see that a lot in The Last of Us, but this was something that, looking at this level, it definitely gave me that vibe. I don't know how much of this level inspired The Last of Us. I know that when they were making Uncharted 3, they were making The Last of Us as well simultaneously. So I don't know if maybe, how these things inspired each other, but Yeah, when I look at this, I certainly get that vibe.
I have an idea.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, you're crazy. Watch it. That thing's coming out of the ceiling.
Also, I remember this level when I first played it, just being memorable for Chapter 7, and when the whole place starts to kind of burn down. That part was much more memorable to me, and I thought it was a really great action sequence.
All right. Here we
Um,
go.
the one section being the spiders, which didn't, or beetles or whatever it was, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. I think it was purely just there to be an homage to that old, I don't know if it's old, you consider it old, but the Mummy, or at least it felt like it at the time.
Okay, let's see if we can find a way to that tower.
Yeah, you see that water effect, that just looks... Now, again, I don't know how much of this is because of the remake, you know, how much Blue Point had an impact or influence on that. But that's some great looking water effects. And even just those little things, you know, like the light creeping through the buildings and the way that they bounce off of Nathan. I mean, I don't know. It's just, it's really, really good looking game.
Hey, Nate. Square tower. Looks pretty old.
Yeah. That matches the one in Lawrence's notebook. That must be it. Nice.
Thanks.
Alright, so once that cutscene's over, you're going to pop a right here, and you are going to pick up the 4th treasure, I believe, from this level. And after that, you are going to go straight ahead. Now, interestingly enough, even though we're on the 6th chapter, there's still a bit of tutorializing that happens. You know, that you go, in terms of when it comes to fighting enemies, you'll see that you don't get the full suite of, or at least they haven't introduced all the mechanics to the game just yet, which is a little surprising. So, your next treasure, which I believe is your 5th one, if I have my numbers correctly, is in this room. You just go ahead and shoot that down, and
Hey, Nate.
pick that one up.
Isn't this the same symbol that was on the tower?
Yeah.
And now you're in your first
gotta mean something,
puzzle
right?
room.
Maybe a secret passage?
And a fireplace? Kinda on the nose, don't you think?
Yeah, too simple.
Hey, check out these suits of armor. Wait. Lawrence made a note about
Now, I don't know
like
if you
this.
have to move one to
Yeah.
trigger your
Here,
journal
see?
being opened.
4 knights. With an axe, a
But-
shield, a sword, and a morning star.
The puzzle's
Just
pretty
like the ones in this
straightforward.
room.
Basically, each of the knights, you want them to face the other knights, so, or the next to the corresponding knight holding the weapon. So, the knight with the shield and the knight with the sword, you want them to face the knight with the halberd. And then the knight with the halberd, you want him to face the knight with the shield, and the knight with the mace, you want him to face the knight with the shield as well.
Maybe we gotta turn each knight so it's facing the right way.
Yeah, but what's the right way?
So that takes me a little bit to figure out, but once you do, like I said, pretty straightforward. And boom, there you go.
Well, well. A secret passage.
Okay. I'll push, you pull. On 3, ready?
Wait, 1, 2, pull, or 1, 2, 3, pull?
Just pull.
Got it. Nate? Hey, you alright?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll live.
Alright,
There's no
so
way I'm
you're going to
getting
get your
back up
next treasure pretty
there. You gotta head
soon
this
once
way.
you drop
Just
down
meet me
into
on
this
the other
cave.
side.
instead of going straight, which is the direction you're supposed to go in,
Right.
you're going to pop a right
Hope there
and
is
go
another
behind
side.
that rock formation and pick up treasure. I believe it's number 29. Yep, there we go. Number 29.
What the hell is that noise? I should be able to get through here.
Now, I know it's just a video game, but even for me, I do not do well in tight spaces, so seeing these little sequences definitely was a little difficult for me. Now, you also get introduced to the underwater element, and I forget all the controls, but basically, in Uncharted 1 and 2, I forget about 1, but I know in 2 you had the ability to swim, but it was a pretty simple mechanic. There was not much involved there. They definitely expand on that mechanic in this one, where you get to go underwater, you get to hide, you get to shoot, you get to throw grenades, so that definitely is part of it. And there's even a trophy related to kind of aquatic combat, if you will.
Hey, light. It's a good sign. Oh, thank God. Way out. All right, I should be able to climb up through there. Piece of cake. Oh. Oh, crap.
They're here somewhere. Hunt them down.
I gotta warn Sully.
Alright, so this is definitely going to be one of the big combat arenas, especially when you talk in terms of the number of enemies. But obviously for this chapter, this is definitely the first big combat arena. So I tried to think about, okay, how do I go about this? Like, is there a way for me to stealth through my this whole section? And I kind of just gave up and said, you know what, let me try and take this guy out. I see an exploding barrel. And then we just go for it.
That's what I need.
And I pick out that sawed-off shotgun, which is, I think, a nice little throwback, actually, to Uncharted 2, because I want to say that Lazarevich had the sawed-off shotgun in that game. I think one of the other things you can take advantage of in this encounter that I recall was that enemies are very aggressive, and they make a habit of running towards you a lot, and you can use that to your advantage if you need to. Yeah, I kind of lose sense of like where the enemies were. I managed to recover here, but I wouldn't recommend you do what I'm doing, because I'm pretty bad at this. Although I do take him out pretty nicely. Yeah, I panicked there and just threw 2 shells into that guy. One complaint I've actually had about this game is the feedback mechanics or animation of when you hit a guard does not feel that responsive. You see me die there. Now, this is obviously the only time I die, you know. It's not like I die any more times. I'm totally kidding. I die a lot in this section. So one of the things there are 2 things I'm going to talk about first, but the first is one of my strategies for this section to make it a little bit easier for myself. I found that by sticking back here, you can take advantage of the fact that a lot of the enemies kind of run after you or run towards you. You can just hide here and then take them out one at a time like that. So that helped me out with clearing out a lot of the enemies here. But yeah, one of the things I was going to say was I felt like feedback mechanism for letting you know whether you hit a guard wasn't as clear in this game as it was with other games. I felt like with Uncharted 2, they at least had like maybe a blood splatter or something to let you know, like, hey, you know, that worked, you hit that guy. But in this one, it felt a little too subtle, so sometimes it was hard for me to know if I was even, you know, hitting a guy or my bullets were doing any damage, which is definitely, to me, a step down compared to the previous game.
Jesus, they brought a small army.
See, I almost died right here. Definitely think on brutal difficulty I would have been dead on that one. Yeah, I try to figure out if there's a way for me to kind of get behind them, and then I realize, well, maybe they're above me. Let me try and get up to them. I also think in this video, or at least in this section, is where I got a lot of the blind hipfire metal. Now in this next section, which as soon as you take out that guy, you're going to get your first introduction to the
Thanks
grenades.
for the gift, boys.
Definitely a very useful aspect of the game. But then as soon as you get that, you're going to drop down and you're going to get treasure number 30. And we will cut off there, and I will see you back in part 2.